The train screamed against the rails as it pulled into Blackridge Station, steam curling into the pale morning sky like a warning no one heard. Clara Whitmore remained seated long after the other passengers had gathered their belongings. Her gloved hands rested calmly in her lap, but beneath the lace her fingers trembled with restrained memory rather than fear. She had rehearsed this moment for 3 years. When the conductor called the final stop, she rose gracefully, lifted her small leather suitcase, and stepped down onto the wooden platform. The town was smaller than she had imagined. Dust clung to every surface, and the buildings leaned slightly as though tired from years of wind. It looked ordinary. That was the cruelest part. At the far end of the platform stood the man she had come for. Ethan Caldwell was taller than most men around him, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat that marked him as someone of means. His hat shaded his eyes, but she recognized him instantly from the photograph she had studied until the edges softened from handling. Time had carved faint lines into his face, yet the jaw was the same, the posture was the same, the man who had ridden away while her home burned. He stepped forward when he noticed her lingering. "Miss Clara Bennett?" he asked. She inclined her head gently, offering the practiced smile she had perfected in her mirror. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, I presume." His gaze softened with visible relief. "Welcome to Blackridge." His voice was steady, warm, even. If she did not know better, she might have believed him incapable of cruelty. He reached for her suitcase before she could protest. "A long journey, long enough," she replied softly. As they walked toward his carriage, she kept her movements modest, her tone gentle, every word carefully measured. She was not Clara Whitmore here. That girl had died in smoke and ash. Here she was Clara Bennett, school-educated, orphaned by illness, seeking stability as a mail-order bride. He helped her into the carriage with surprising care. "I hope the arrangements meet your expectations," he said as he climbed up beside her and flicked the reins. "I know correspondence only reveals so much. You were very clear in your letters," she replied. That had been her first surprise. She had expected arrogance in his writing, perhaps greed. Instead, his letters had been direct and unadorned. He wrote of loneliness, of needing companionship after years devoted solely to expanding his ranch. He mentioned no past, no mistakes. "I won't pretend I'm skilled in courtship," he admitted as the horses moved. "But I believe in honesty." "Honesty," the word pressed sharply against her ribs. "And you seek a wife," she said. "I do. For love." He considered that longer than she expected. "For partnership. Love, if we're fortunate." She turned her gaze to the passing prairie, hiding the flicker of bitterness that rose inside her. Fortune had never favored her family. The Caldwell Ranch appeared over a gentle rise, sprawling and impressive. White fencing framed acres of land, cattle grazing lazily under the sun. The house itself stood tall and solid, its wide porch suggesting permanence. 3 years ago, her father's ranch had looked much the same. She stepped down carefully when they arrived. 2 ranch hands paused their work to observe her discreetly. She felt their curiosity, but did not acknowledge it. Inside, the house was spacious, though not ostentatious. Dark wood beams lined the ceilings. A stone fireplace dominated the main room. "It's not grand," Ethan said, almost apologetically. "It's more than sufficient," she replied. It had been his men who had ridden onto her family's land with similar apologies. She swallowed the memory before it could surface too clearly. "I had the guest room prepared," he said. "Until we decide on arrangements." There was no presumption in his tone, only respect, that unsettled her more than cruelty would have. The first week passed with careful observation. She watched how he treated his workers. Fair wages, steady instructions, no raised voice unless necessary. She watched how he negotiated with a neighboring rancher firm, but not ruthless. It did not match the monster she had built in her mind. On the third night, she found his office. The door was slightly ajar, lamplight spilling across the hallway floor. He was seated at his desk, reviewing ledgers. "May I?" She asked softly from the doorway. He looked up, surprised but not displeased. "Of course." She stepped inside, letting her gaze drift subtly across the room. Shelves lined with documents. A locked drawer on the right side of the desk. A rifle mounted above the door. "You work late," she observed. "Expansion doesn't manage itself." "Expansion," she repeated lightly. He leaned back slightly. "Blackridge grows every year. Land changes hands." Her pulse tightened. "And those who don't wish to sell?" she asked. His expression darkened just faintly. "Sometimes debt forces choices." There it was. Her father had refused to sell. He had believed loyalty and hard work were enough to survive drought and pressure. When Caldwell's men had returned with documents and threats, her father had stood firm. The fire that followed had been ruled accidental. She stepped closer to the desk. "You believe progress justifies sacrifice." He studied her carefully now. "I believe survival requires hard decisions." Her throat tightened. "I should retire," she said softly, turning before her composure fractured. That night she opened her suitcase after locking the door. Beneath neatly folded dresses lay a smaller wooden box. Inside rested a silver revolver, compact but deadly. Beside it, an old photograph, her family standing before their ranch house, smiling beneath a wide summer sky. Her father's arm around her shoulders, her mother's gentle eyes, behind them the barn that had burned first. She traced her father's face with trembling fingers. "I haven't forgotten," she whispered. The following days forced proximity between them. He insisted she ride with him to inspect the northern pasture. She accepted, masking reluctance beneath polite agreement. The open prairie stretched endlessly, wind tugging at her hair beneath her bonnet. "You ride well," he observed. "My father taught me." He nodded. "Mine did too. Said a person should know how to stay upright when the ground turns uncertain." Her jaw tightened. "Did your father remain in Blackridge?" he asked. "He did not," she replied carefully. "He lost his land." Ethan's gaze sharpened slightly, though he kept his tone neutral. "Many did, during the drought. Some losses are not caused by drought." Silence settled between them, thick as the approaching clouds. That evening a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Rain lashed against the windows, echoing faintly of another night years ago. She stood in the main room, staring into the fire when he approached. "You're troubled," he said. "Memories," she replied. "Of?" She turned slowly. "Of losing everything." His expression shifted. Something like recognition flickered there. "I know something of that," he said quietly. She almost laughed. "Do you?" she whispered. Before he could answer, lightning cracked overhead, plunging the room briefly into darkness before the lamps steadied. The storm kept them indoors the next day. She used the time to search his office while he supervised repairs to the fencing. The locked drawer yielded after a careful hairpin and steady patience. Inside lay contracts, deeds. Several bearing names she recognized. Whitmore Ranch. Her breath caught. She unfolded the document carefully. Transferred under outstanding debt. Signed by an intermediary agent. Not Ethan Caldwell. Her fingers tightened around the paper. The signature belonged to Thomas Reed. She knew that name. Reed had been Caldwell's foreman 3 years ago. The man who had delivered the final ultimatum to her father. Her mind raced. Had Ethan ordered it, or had Reed acted beyond instruction? Footsteps sounded in the hallway. She barely closed the drawer and stepped back before Ethan entered. "You shouldn't be alone in here," he said lightly, though his eyes searched her face. "Forgive me," she said calmly. "I was curious about the man I am meant to marry." "And what have you discovered?" he asked. She held his gaze. "I'm still deciding." Days later, Thomas Reed rode into the ranch yard unannounced. Clara saw him first from the porch. The years had hardened him further. The scar across his cheek remained unmistakable. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Ethan greeted him stiffly. "What brings you back?" "Business," Reed replied. His eyes fell upon Clara. Recognition flickered there, cold and sharp. He masked it quickly, but not quickly enough. That night, she lay awake listening to muted voices from Ethan's office. Reed's tone was aggressive. "You don't know what you're inviting into your house," Reed muttered. Ethan's reply was quieter but firm. "Mind your place." Her breath slowed deliberately. "He doesn't know." Morning arrived with tension thick in the air. Reed cornered her near the stables. "You've grown," he said under his breath. She did not feign confusion. "You remember, should have stayed buried with the rest," he replied. "You set the fire," she whispered. "Your father refused fair terms. You murdered him." His smile was thin, careful. Ethan's voice cut across the yard. "Reed," the man stepped back smoothly. Clara felt the old rage rising like flame in her throat. That evening, Ethan approached her with an expression she had not seen before, concern edged with suspicion. "You know him," he said. "Yes." "From where?" She inhaled slowly. "This ranch acquired land 3 years ago, land that did not wish to be sold." His jaw tightened. "I wasn't present for every negotiation, but you benefited." Silence stretched. "What are you accusing me of?" he asked quietly. She stepped closer, the years of grief sharpening her courage. "My family's ranch burned the night your foreman delivered final notice." Shock crossed his face, genuine, unguarded. "Whitmore," he murmured, recognition dawning. "You remember the name?" "Yes," he said hoarsely. "I remember refusing to authorize force." Her breath faltered. "I instructed Reed to negotiate fairly. I left for Cheyenne that week. When I returned, he claimed the debt had been settled and the transfer complete." "And the fire?" she demanded. He said it was lightning. She laughed bitterly. It was no storm. Understanding slowly replaced confusion in his expression. "I dismissed him months later," Ethan said quietly, "for aggressive practices I could not prove." "And yet you kept the land." He closed his eyes briefly. "I should have investigated further." Her hand trembled as she reached into her pocket and drew the small silver revolver. He did not step back. "You came here for revenge," he said. "Yes." He looked not afraid, but regretful. "If I am guilty of negligence, I will answer for it," he said evenly, "but I did not order your family's death." Reed's voice echoed from the doorway. "She won't pull the trigger." They both turned. Reed stood armed. "You should have finished the job," he told Clara coldly. Ethan moved instinctively, placing himself slightly in front of her. "Enough," he said. Reed fired first. The sound exploded through the room. Clara's ears rang. Ethan staggered but did not fall. Without thinking, she aimed and fired. Reed collapsed against the doorframe. Silence followed, broken only by Ethan's labored breath. She dropped to her knees beside him. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's not deep." He managed. Her hands pressed against the wound, panic overriding vengeance. "You stepped in front of me. I won't let another Whitmore die because of my oversight," he said faintly. Tears blurred her vision. The revenge she had carried for 3 years dissolved into something heavier truth. In the weeks that followed, Ethan recovered slowly. Reed's death exposed the truth. Documents surfaced. Witnesses spoke. Ethan relinquished the Whitmore land publicly. transferring it fully into Clara's name. "You owe me nothing," she told him one evening. "I owe you honesty," he replied. She stood at the edge of the reclaimed property weeks later, wind brushing against her skirts. The house was gone, but the land remained. Ethan approached quietly. "You could leave," he said, "start anew elsewhere." She looked at him, at the man she had intended to kill. "I came here for revenge," she said softly, and now, she considered the strange path fate had carved. "Now I see the difference between guilt and responsibility." He waited. "You did not strike the match," she said, "but you failed to see the smoke. And I will spend my life correcting that blindness." The wind shifted, gentler now. "I played the lorder bride you wanted," she admitted. A faint smile touched his lips despite everything. "And I did not know I was being hunted." She met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps we were both searching for something." "For what?" he asked. "Redemption," she said. This time, when he reached for her hand, she did not pull away. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, scarred but alive. And in the space where vengeance had once burned, something steadier began to grow.